the man behind the poster. The sun burned low over the city skyline, turning the sky orange and purple as people hurried home from work. The streets buzzed with noise, car horns, chattering crowds, and the sound of footsteps on pavement. But one corner stayed quiet, just outside an old movie theater. There, under a faded poster of Keanu Reeves from an old film, sat a young woman wrapped in a thin, torn blanket. Her name was Emily. She looked up each time someone walked by, hoping for a smile, a coin, even a glance of kindness. But most people avoided her eyes. Some turned their heads. Others tightened their grip on their bags. No one stopped. No one asked why a girl who looked barely 20 was sleeping outside, cold and alone. What they didn't know was that Emily wasn't always like this. Just 2 years ago, she was studying film in college, dreaming of writing screenplays that would touch hearts. She grew up watching Keanu Reeves's movies, not just for the action or drama, but for something deeper. He always seemed real, kind, quiet, honest. In a world full of noise, his silence spoke the loudest to her. When her mother died in a car crash and her father left soon after, Emily's world broke. She lost her home, her school, and her sense of safety. She carried a small backpack with only 3 things: a worn-out notebook, a broken pen, and a picture of her and her mom at a Keanu Reeves fan event. It was the happiest day of her life. She smiled every time she looked at it. Even now, sitting on cold concrete, that memory kept her warm. She didn't beg. She didn't ask for help. She just sat there, quiet, scribbling in her notebook whenever she could. Sometimes she wrote stories. Sometimes she wrote letters. Most of them started the same way. "Dear Keanu, I know you'll never read this," but she never expected anyone to read them. She just needed someone to hear her, even if that someone was a dream. But fate has a strange way of listening when no one else does. One evening, as darkness crept in and the city lights flickered, "On?" A man in a black hoodie and a baseball cap walked by the theater. He paused, glancing at the poster. Then, he looked down at the girl sitting beneath it. She had her head buried in her knees, her blanket wrapped tight around her shoulders. He didn't walk away. Instead, he bent down slowly and spoke in a gentle voice. "You okay out here?" Emily lifted her head, startled. Her eyes met his, warm, kind, and somehow familiar. "I'm fine," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Just resting." The man nodded. He looked like any other stranger, but there was something calming about his presence. He noticed the notebook beside her. It was half open, showing words written in shaky but careful handwriting. "You write stories?" he asked. "Sometimes," she said, guarding the notebook with her arm. He smiled gently. "I used to write too. Not very well, though." She smiled back, the first real smile in weeks. "What's your name?" he asked. "Emily." "Hi, Emily," he said, stretching out his hand. "I'm Keanu." She froze. The name hit her like thunder, and her eyes widened. At first, she thought it was a cruel joke. Then, as he pulled down his hoodie and removed his cap, she saw his face in full. Her heart stopped. She had dreamed of this face since childhood, not as a fan dreaming of fame, but as someone who saw safety and strength in the quiet soul behind it. It was really him. She couldn't speak. Tears welled up in her eyes, and her hands trembled. Keanu Reeves sat beside her on the sidewalk, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. No cameras, no crowd, just 2 people beneath an old movie poster, sharing a quiet evening. He didn't ask why she was there. He didn't judge. Instead, he listened. She told him about her mother, about the night everything changed, about the letters she wrote but never sent. He sat quietly, his eyes never leaving hers. "You know," he said softly, "sometimes the best stories come from pain, but only if you survive the next chapter." Emily looked down. "I don't know if I can." He paused for a moment, then stood up and offered his hand. "Let's walk," he said. "I'll get you something warm." She hesitated, then slowly reached for his hand. It felt steady, real, kind as they walked down the street together. People turned their heads, eyes wide with shock. Some whispered, recognizing him. Others pulled out phones. But Keanu didn't care. He shielded Emily from the attention, leading her into a quiet little cafe where no one disturbed them. He bought her soup, tea, and warm bread. He sat and listened as she opened up like a flower in sunlight. And when she cried, he didn't tell her to stop. He just sat with her, like a friend, like someone who truly cared. That night, when he walked her back to the theater, he handed her a phone number on a piece of paper. "This is my team. If you're ever ready to take the next step, call them. I'll make sure they help." Emily stared at the paper. She wanted to believe it, but life had taught her to be careful with hope. Still, she tucked it deep inside her notebook, where the picture of her and her mom had once lived. After Keanu left, she sat alone again. But this time, something was different. The world felt a little warmer, and for the first time in a long while, she believed her next chapter might be worth writing. The call that changed everything the night after Keanu left, Emily didn't sleep. She kept staring at the paper he gave her, her fingers brushing over the numbers again and again. She didn't know what to expect if she called. Maybe it was just a kind gesture. Maybe someone would pick up and tell her it was all a mistake. Still, the thought of doing nothing scared her more. As the morning sun stretched over the rooftops, Emily sat by the edge of the sidewalk, her blanket still wrapped around her like armor. Her eyes were heavy, her body cold. But deep inside, something had started to shift. She wasn't used to kindness lasting more than a moment. But Keanu's eyes had held something she hadn't felt in a long time: belief. By afternoon, her hunger grew too loud. She used the last few coins she had to buy a small bread roll from a nearby stall. The vendor barely looked at her. As she sat back down, she thought of the cafe the night before. She remembered the warmth, the laughter of other people, the way Keanu had gently pushed her tea closer when her hands were too cold to lift it. She reached into her notebook and pulled out the paper again. Her hands shook as she found an old payphone, a few blocks away. The receiver smelled of rust and old rain, but she didn't care. She slid the coins into the slot, pressed the numbers slowly, and waited. The line rang once, twice. Then a calm voice answered. "Hello?" Emily froze. Hi," she whispered. I was told to call this number. May I ask who gave it to you?" "Keanu Reeves." There was a pause. Then a quiet shift in tone. Not disbelief, not surprise, just gentle understanding. "Are you Emily?" "Yes," she said, voice cracking. "We've been expecting your call." Those words hit her like a wave. Someone was actually waiting for her, not chasing her away, not ignoring her. Waiting, the woman on the phone introduced herself as Mia. She said she worked closely with Keanu, helping him manage quiet outreach efforts, things the world didn't see. He had mentioned a girl with a notebook and gentle eyes who needed a safe place to start over. "Would you like that, Emily?" Mia asked. "A place to stay, warm meals, time to write, and people who care." Emily's lips trembled. "Yes," she whispered. That evening, a small car pulled up beside the old theater. The driver stepped out, holding a sign with her name. Emily approached slowly, heart pounding. The woman smiled kindly. "You don't have to be afraid," she said. "We're just here to help." Emily climbed into the back seat. As the city blurred past the window, she held her notebook close. She didn't know what would come next, but for the first time in years, she wasn't moving alone. The car pulled into a quiet neighborhood, not fancy, not cold, just peaceful. The house they stopped at had flowers blooming at the porch, and warm yellow lights glowing through the windows. It didn't feel like a shelter. It felt like a home. Inside, a soft-spoken older woman greeted her. Her name was Lena. She offered Emily clean clothes, a warm shower, and a room of her own. The bed had soft blankets. The shelves had books. The table had a small lamp perfect for writing. Emily stood in the center of the room, not knowing what to do. Everything felt too good, too soft. She touched the blankets to make sure they were real. Lena returned with a plate of food, pasta, fresh bread, and a cup of tea. "You can rest tonight," she said kindly. "Tomorrow, we'll talk about what comes next." Emily sat on the bed and ate slowly. Her body relaxed with every bite. Her heart started to believe this wasn't a dream. She didn't remember falling asleep. Only that when she woke up, the sunlight was streaming through the window, and for the first time in so long, she didn't feel cold. Later that morning, Mia came to visit her. They sat in the kitchen as Lena baked cookies in the background. "Keanu wanted me to tell you something," Mia said. Emily leaned in. "He read some of your writing, the page you left open in your notebook. He was moved by it. He said your words have weight." Emily's eyes widened. She had forgotten what she had scribbled. It was a letter to her mother, a short story about waiting, and a few lines about seeing hope in someone else's eyes. "He believes you should keep writing," Mia added. "And he wants to help." Emily couldn't speak for a moment. She felt her throat tighten. "But why?" she finally asked. "He doesn't even know me." Mia smiled. "He knows more than you think. He's walked dark paths too. When he sees someone standing in the dark, he doesn't turn away. He lights a candle." From that day on, Emily's life started to change. Slowly, piece by piece. Lena helped her heal from the past. Mia brought her books and pens, and every week a small letter came to the house, never signed with a name, but always ending with the same words. "Your story matters," Emily wrote every day, her notebook filled with stories, poems, and letters. Sometimes she laughed. Sometimes she cried. But she kept writing. And somewhere in the quiet corners of Hollywood, Keanu Reeves kept reading. He didn't want fame from it. He didn't want praise. He just wanted her to find her voice again. And she was. The voice inside the silence. Emily sat by the window each morning now, the sun warming her face, her fingers wrapped gently around a mug of tea. The quiet of Lena's home was different from the silence she had known on the streets. This silence wasn't empty. It was peaceful, soft, and healing. Her days had rhythm now. Wake up, write, read, help Lena in the garden, then write some more. But inside her, something new had started to grow. A question, not of fear or doubt, but of purpose. Why? Me? Why had Keanu seen her? Out of all the people in the city, thousands who walked by that theater, why did he stop? And why had he cared enough to send help, to read her words, to believe in a girl the world had forgotten? Emily didn't want to waste the chance she had been given. Her stories became deeper, more honest. She started writing not just for herself, but for others like her, people who had fallen through cracks, who had been silenced by pain. Her notebook was now filled with scenes of hope, of struggle, of light breaking through broken places. One afternoon, Lena came into her room holding a letter. "This came for you," she said. Emily opened the envelope with trembling hands. The handwriting was neat, careful. "Dear Emily, I read your latest story, the one about the little girl who lost her voice but sang in her dreams. I think that girl is you, and I believe your dreams will be louder than anything the world tried to take away. Never stop writing." A quiet friend, Emily wiped her eyes slowly. Her fingers brushed over the ink, and she could feel the words settling deep into her heart. Someone believed in her dreams. Someone saw her not as a broken girl, but as a rising one. That same evening, Mia called. "Emily," she said, "Keanu wants to meet you again. Privately. No media. Just a quiet dinner." Emily's heart pounded. Her first instinct was fear. Fear of not being ready, of saying the wrong thing, of being overwhelmed. But she took a deep breath and nodded. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll go." The next night, Lena helped her pick an outfit. Not expensive, just something clean, simple, and soft. She tied her hair back and looked at herself in the mirror. For the first time in years, she didn't just see a survivor. She saw someone becoming whole. A car picked her up and drove her to a quiet part of town. It stopped outside a small, candlelit restaurant. The place was tucked away from the busy streets, peaceful and cozy. When she walked inside, Keanu was already waiting. No security, no flashing lights. Just him, sitting at a small table in the corner, wearing the same quiet smile she remembered. "Emily," he said, standing up gently. "It's good to see you." She sat down, nervous but honored. He didn't ask about her past. He didn't dig into pain. Instead, he talked about books, films, and the little things that made life beautiful. Then, he looked at her and said, "You're writing. It's real. It matters. You don't just tell stories. You feel them. And when you do that, you help others feel less alone." Emily's throat tightened. She looked down at the table. "I never thought my words could mean anything," she said. Keanu leaned forward. "When the world doesn't listen," he said, "you write anyway. Because someone out there is waiting for a voice just like yours." They talked for hours. About life, about art, about second chances. Before they parted, Keanu handed her a small box. Inside was a pen. Gold, elegant, with a quiet weight to it. "I've used this in every script I ever wrote notes on," he said. "I want you to have it now." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "Write something the world needs," he added. "Then send it to me." She nodded slowly, unable to speak. On the way home, she held the pen close. It wasn't just a gift. It was a promise that her voice mattered. The next morning, she opened her notebook and began her most personal story. Yet, not fiction, not fantasy, but truth. Her truth. A story of a girl under a movie poster, and the man who saw her when no one else did. The story that reached the world. The sun was just beginning to rise when Emily placed the final period on the last page. Her hands were sore, and her eyes burned from tears. She hadn't even noticed falling, but her heart felt light. The story she had written was no longer just a collection of memories. It was a journey, raw, painful, beautiful, a path through darkness into a quiet kind of hope. She titled it, "The Girl Beneath the Poster." She didn't know if it was good by anyone else's standards, but for the first time that didn't matter. It was honest. It was hers. She wrapped the pages in a simple folder, tied it with string, and wrote a short note for Keanu. "You told me to write something the world needs. I don't know if this is it, but it's the best I have. Thank you for seeing me when no one else did." With Mia's help, the manuscript was delivered quietly. No one outside their small circle knew. No announcements, no promises, just a shared silence and trust. A week passed. Then 2. Emily kept writing. Smaller pieces, letters, poems, some for herself, some for others at the shelter. She even began teaching a weekly writing circle Lena had started for young women going through recovery. They met every Thursday in the little garden behind the house, sitting on cushions with notebooks in their laps. Emily watched as girls who had been silent for months began putting words to their pain, their dreams, their questions. And slowly the garden filled with laughter. Then, one night, Emily's phone buzzed. It was a number she didn't recognize. She answered with a quiet, "Hello?" The voice on the other end was warm, excited. "Hi, Emily. I'm Claire. I work in publishing. Keanu just handed me your manuscript. Emily's breath caught in her chest. He said it's the most important story he's read this year, Claire continued, and he wants us to help you bring it to the world. To the world? Emily repeated, barely believing it. Yes, but only if you're ready. Emily didn't speak for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly, even though Claire couldn't see her. I'm ready, she said softly. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Editors reached out. Cover designers sent samples. Claire walked her through every step with patience and kindness. They didn't try to change her voice or polish away her truth. They just helped her shape it for the world. Keanu stayed in touch the entire time, always in the background, never pushing. He simply encouraged her to trust her voice. One day he sent another note. Don't let the world scare you into silence. Again, your truth is what gives others courage. Months later, the book was printed. The girl beneath the poster hit shelves quietly, without the noise of celebrity gossip or press tours. But the response was louder than anyone expected. People read it. They shared it. They cried over it. Reviews called it honest, soulful, a mirror for the forgotten. But to Emily, the real reward came in the form of letters, handwritten ones, emails, messages on social media. People from all over the world wrote to her, "Your story saved me. I thought I was alone. Now I don't. Thank you for saying what I couldn't." One letter came from a teacher in another country who read her book to her class every morning. Another came from a man who hadn't spoken to his daughter in 10 years. He reached out to her after finishing Emily's story. Emily read each one with tears in her eyes. The girl who had once written to an empty sky was now being heard by thousands. And yet, she stayed grounded. She still helped Lena in the garden. She still led her writing circle every Thursday. Fame didn't matter to her, only impact. Then one afternoon, Mia called with news that took her breath away. "Emily," she said, "your book, it's being adapted into a film." Emily nearly dropped the phone. "What?" she whispered. "Keanu has offered to co-produce it, under one condition. You write the script." Emily sat on the edge of her bed, her heart pounding. She didn't know what to say. Her journey had started on a cold sidewalk beneath a movie poster. Now her story would become a film. Not just any film, but one crafted with care, by the very man who saw her when she was invisible. Keanu sent one more note, written in the same calm handwriting. Your story began under my name. Now the world will know yours. Finish what you started. The world is listening. Emily picked up the same pen he had given her months ago. It still felt heavy in her hand, not from weight, but from meaning. She opened a new notebook, took a deep breath, and began to write. Scene 1. A young girl sits alone beneath a faded movie poster. The light on the big screen, the studio was quiet that morning, just before dawn. Wide white walls, cables on the floor, cameras waiting to roll. Emily stood in the center, holding a warm cup of tea, wearing a headset that still felt too big for her small frame. She looked around and couldn't believe it was real. It had started as ink on paper. Her pain, her memories, her quiet dreams. Now it was becoming a film. Her story. The one she had once written in the margins of torn notebooks with cold fingers. On street corners, the director approached her gently, holding the script. "We're ready to start with scene 1, he said. "Want to watch from the monitor?" Emily nodded. She followed him to a small screen where she could see the set, carefully built to look just like that old theater corner she once called home. The same faded movie poster, the same cracked sidewalk, even the same small blanket. The details made her chest tighten. It was like staring into a mirror from the past. Then, the actress playing young Emily walked into the shot. She moved like her. She looked like her. She even held the notebook the same way, tight against her chest, like it held the last piece. Of her soul, Emily covered her mouth with one hand. The camera rolled, and as the scene played out, word by word, exactly as she had written it, tears fell down her cheeks. Not from sadness, but from something she never expected to feel again: pride. The weeks of filming passed quickly. She worked quietly with the team, helping them understand the heart behind every scene. She didn't care about the spotlight. She didn't care about red carpets or headlines. All she wanted was for the story to stay true. Keanu visited the set often, always humble, always soft-spoken. One day, after a powerful scene wrapped, he walked over to Emily, handing her a folded chair with her name printed on the back. "This is yours now," he said. "Not just for this film, for whatever comes next." She looked at the chair, then at him. "I still don't understand why you did all this for me," she whispered. Keanu paused for a moment, then said, "Because once, someone gave me a second chance. And now, it's my turn to pass that on." Emily nodded slowly. "Thank you," she said, her voice shaking. He smiled. "Don't thank me. Just keep writing. That's how you'll thank the world." Months later, the movie premiered in a quiet cinema downtown. No flashing cameras, no roaring crowd, just close friends, a few industry guests, and people who had once walked similar paths as Emily. Lena sat in the front row, tissues in her hand, already crying before the lights even dimmed. Mia was beside her, holding Emily's hand. And Keanu, he sat at the back smiling quietly, letting the story unfold without needing attention. The screen faded in, a young girl under a movie poster, a man in a hoodie, the small gesture that changed everything. As the film played, people in the audience began to cry. Not just soft sniffles, but deep, aching sobs. Others sat frozen, their eyes wide, remembering their own moments of being unseen, of hoping for a hand that never came. And when the final scene ended, the one where the grown-up Emily holds a pen and whispers, "This is just the beginning," the room fell completely silent. Then came the applause. Not loud, not wild, just steady, honest, heartfelt. Emily didn't stand right away. She sat there, trembling, overwhelmed by the sound of people clapping. Not for her fame, but for her truth. After the screening, people lined up to speak to her. An older woman with gray hair held her hands and said, "My daughter left home years ago. I gave up hope. But your story, I'm going to try again." A young man in a wheelchair said, "I've never felt seen until tonight." And a little girl, no older than 7, gave Emily a drawing of a girl writing under a starry sky. "That's you," she said proudly. "You make the stars listen." Emily knelt down, took the drawing gently and hugged her. "And now you'll grow up to make others shine," she whispered. Later that night, as she stood on the roof of her small apartment, a space she had earned with her own writing, Emily looked out over the city, the same city that once ignored her, now reading her, watching her, hearing her. She pulled out the old gold pen and opened a fresh notebook. On the first page she wrote, "For those who sit in silence, waiting to be seen, I see you. This story is for you." And under the stars, she began the next chapter, not just of her book, but of her life. The echo of one act, the world didn't change overnight, but Emily's story. It moved people. The film became more than just a quiet indie project. It became a whisper that grew into a wave. People shared it with friends. Teachers played scenes in classrooms. Shelters showed it during healing sessions. It didn't roar like a blockbuster. It breathed, soft and steady, like a heart beginning to beat again after a long silence. Keanu never stood in front of it. He stayed in the background, always redirecting praise to the writer, always saying, "This is her story." Emily kept writing. She released short books, reflections, and poems that captured the raw truths many were too afraid to speak. But her favorite part of each day was still the Thursday writing circle in Lena's garden. The group had grown, not just in number, but in heart. Girls who once mumbled now read their stories aloud. Some laughed at their own pages. Others cried and were held gently by the circle. Emily would sit in the middle, listening, guiding, sometimes just holding space. One cloudy afternoon, after the session ended, a shy girl named Maya lingered behind. She was new, barely 16, with eyes that held a storm of sadness. "Miss Emily," she said quietly, "how did you know your story mattered? How did you know people would care?" Emily knelt in front of her, smiled gently, and replied, "I didn't. I just knew it mattered to me, and that was enough to begin." Maya's lips trembled, and she handed Emily a folded paper. "I wrote something," she whispered, "but I was afraid to read it." Emily unfolded it and read silently. It was raw, full of pain, full of truth, and full of courage. She looked up, her eyes warm. "Maya," she said, This is the kind of story that will help someone wake up tomorrow. This matters." The girl cried quietly, and Emily hugged her tight. In that moment, something clicked deep inside Emily's heart, something that went beyond books and movies. This was her real calling, not just writing, but lifting voices, showing others how to turn pain into paper, silence into sentences, darkness into light. A year later, Emily stood on a small stage inside a packed community center. Above her hung a simple banner, "The girl beneath the poster foundation, helping voices rise." What began as one act of kindness had grown into a movement. With Keanu's quiet support and Emily's growing strength, they built a space where struggling youth could write, speak, and be heard. It wasn't charity. It was empowerment. Lena ran the wellness center attached to it. Mia managed the outreach team. Dozens of volunteers helped every week, and the walls were covered with stories, real ones, written by those who once felt invisible. During the launch event, Emily stepped up to the microphone. She wore a simple dress, a necklace with her mother's picture, and Keanu's gold pen clipped to her folder. The crowd fell silent. Emily began, "When I was younger, I sat on a sidewalk under a movie poster hoping someone would see me." She told the room everything, not to impress, but to connect. And when she said the line, "He didn't just see me, he believed in me," people began to cry. Towards the back, Keanu stood in the shadows, arms crossed, tears quietly in his eyes. He didn't need applause. He had already seen the greatest reward. One person lifting hundreds more. After the speech, Emily stepped off the stage and walked straight to him. They stood face to face. No crowd, no cameras, just two souls connected by something pure, kindness. "You changed my life," she said softly. He shook his head. "No," he whispered. "You just needed a mirror to see who you really were." They hugged, not like a fan and a star, but like family. And that night, as Emily walked home, hand in hand with the little girl who gave her that starry sky drawing months ago, she looked up at the moon. She smiled. She had once been lost under a poster. But now she was a light, not because of fame, not because of books, but because of a simple truth. One act of kindness can echo forever.